The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before the research vessel Star Seeker. Its sleek, modern design reflected the purple light of a distant nebula as it drifted through an unexplored sector of the galaxy. Inside the ship's main research lab, lead archaeologist James Wilson stared at his scanning equipment with growing excitement. "Captain, you need to see this," James called out, his four-fingered hand pointing at the holographic display. "These readings are unlike anything we've encountered before." Captain Turner walked over, her scaled skin shimming under the lab's bright lights. She leaned forward, examining the strange energy signatures that pulsed across the screen. "What exactly are we looking at, James?" "A fleet," he replied, adjusting the scanner's range. "A massive fleet of ships just sitting out there in the void. They appear to be ancient, possibly thousands of years old." The captain's eyes widened. "Plot a course," she ordered through the ship's communication system. "All senior staff to the bridge." As the Star Seeker changed direction, James gathered his research tools. His heart raced with anticipation. In his 20 years of space archaeology, he had never encountered anything of this scale. Hours later, the first visual contact left the entire bridge crew speechless. Hundreds of ships floated in perfect formation, their dark hulls covered in space dust. They were huge, each one nearly twice the size of the Star Seeker, but their design seemed strangely basic. "Look at those engines," Engineer Roberts laughed, pointing at the massive thrusters. "They're using particle acceleration technology. How primitive. My personal shuttle has more advanced propulsion than these relics." James ignored the comments and focused on his readings. Something about these ships didn't make sense. Their layout was simple, yes, but there was a purpose to their design that he couldn't quite understand. "Captain," he said, "request permission to board the nearest vessel. These ships might look primitive, but my scans are picking up some unusual energy readings deep within their hulls." Captain Turner considered the request. "Granted, but be careful. Old ships can be dangerous. Take a security team with you." The boarding party consisted of James, 2 security officers, and Engineer Roberts, who couldn't resist the chance to examine the ancient junk up close. Their shuttle carefully approached one of the smaller ships in the fleet. "These ships must be at least 3,000 years old," Roberts said as they cut through the airlock. "Look at this manual override system. Nobody's used these since the early days of space travel." Inside, their lights revealed long corridors covered in dust. The air was stale but breathable, suggesting the life support systems were somehow still partially functional. James ran his hand along the wall, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. "The design is interesting," he muttered, more to himself than the others. "Everything is built with simple mechanics. No fancy holographic interfaces, no quantum computing systems. It's almost like—" "Like what?" one of the security officers asked. "Like it was built to last," James replied. "Modern ships are full of complex systems that can break down or be hacked. But these ships, they're built like fortresses, simple, sturdy, and reliable." As they reached the bridge, Engineer Roberts rushed to the main control panel. "This is hilarious. Look at these controls. Actual physical buttons and switches. This belongs in a museum." But James wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on a small symbol etched into the captain's chair. It was partially covered in dust, but still visible, a circle with lines radiating outward, like a simplified sun. "That's impossible," he whispered, quickly checking his database. The symbol matched perfectly with ancient records he had studied for years. Records of a species that had vanished from the galaxy thousands of years ago. "Captain," he called through his communicator, his voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. "I need to report something important. These ships, I think they were built by humans." The laughing on the bridge stopped immediately. Everyone knew the legends of humanity, their incredible ingenuity, their ability to survive against impossible odds, and their habit of surprising more advanced civilizations. James looked around the bridge with new eyes. Suddenly, the simple design didn't seem primitive at all. It seemed intentional. The news of the fleet's human origin spread quickly through the Star Seeker. Within hours, The ship's corridors buzzed with excitement as more research teams prepared to board the ancient vessels. Engineer Roberts had stopped laughing and now stared at the control panels with newfound respect. "James," Captain Turner's voice came through the communicator. "The Science Council wants us to begin full documentation of everything we find. They're sending 3 more research ships to our location." James nodded as he carefully cleaned the dust from another control panel. "Understood, Captain. But I think we should be careful about how many systems we try to access. These ships might be—" A low hum cut through his words. The bridge's lights suddenly flickered to life, casting a soft blue glow across the room. Around them, screens and panels began to power up one by one. "Nobody touch anything!" James shouted, but it was too late. Engineer Roberts had already jumped back from the panel he'd been examining, his face pale with fear. "I didn't do it," Roberts said, raising his hands. "I was just wiping off some dust and something clicked." The main screen at the front of the bridge lit up, displaying lines of text in an ancient human language. James rushed forward, his eyes wide with excitement as he translated the words. "Emergency power restored. System reboot initiated. AI core loading." A soft, gender-neutral voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect modern standard. "Greetings. I am Atlas, the Advanced Tactical Logistics and Assistance System. This vessel has been in dormant mode for 3,247 years, 6 months, and 12 days. The security officers raised their weapons instinctively, but James waved them down. "At last," he said carefully, "I am lead archaeologist James Wilson. Can you tell us about this fleet?" Scanning. "Your biological readings indicate you are not human. However, your clearance level as a scientific researcher grants you basic access." The AI paused briefly. "This is the 7th Fleet of the Human Defense Force, designation Guardian Reserve." The ship hummed louder as more systems came online. Through the bridge windows, James could see lights beginning to flicker across other ships in the fleet. Like a giant creature waking from a long sleep, the entire fleet was coming to life. "Atlas," Roberts asked, his earlier mockery replaced with awe, "why does this ship look so basic? The design is thousands of years behind current technology." A series of holographic displays suddenly appeared around them, far more advanced than anything on their own ship. The primitive buttons and switches slid away, revealing sophisticated control systems underneath. "Appearance can be deceiving," Atlas replied. "This fleet was designed to be underestimated. The visible technology is intentionally outdated. The true systems are hidden beneath." Captain Turner's voice crackled through their communicators, urgent and worried. "James, all the ships are powering up. We're detecting energy readings that are off the charts." Outside, the ancient fleet was transforming. Layers of dust fell away as shield systems activated. Hidden weapon ports opened along the hulls. What had looked like primitive particle engines began to pulse with a strange, dark energy. The Guardian Reserve, Atlas explained, was humanity's insurance policy. They knew that younger races would eventually rise, and not all would be peaceful. This fleet was designed to appear obsolete while housing our most advanced technology. James watched in amazement as the ship's true form was revealed. The simple corridors now glowed with energy fields. The thick metal walls contained quantum computers far more advanced than anything his people had developed. "But why hide all this?" Roberts asked, running his scanner over a control panel that now showed impossibly advanced readings. "Humans had a saying," Atlas responded. "The best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have." This fleet was created to protect future civilizations from threats they couldn't handle alone. We were hidden here, made to look worthless, waiting for the day we would be needed. A new alarm sounded through their communicators. Captain Turner's voice was tense. "James, we're picking up massive ships entering the sector. They're not responding to hails, and their weapons are powered." Atlas's voice became firmer. "Hostile ships detected, beginning full fleet activation. All personnel, please return to your vessel. The Guardian Reserve is awakening to fulfill its purpose." James looked at his team, then back at the AI's holographic interface. "Atlas, What exactly is this fleet capable of? That, the eye replied, is something our enemies are about to discover. The Star Seeker's engines roared as it pulled away from the ancient fleet. Through the bridge windows, James watched as more hostile ships appeared from hyperspace. Massive black vessels shaped like arrowheads, their hulls covered in glowing red lines. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Captain Turner nodded and a harsh voice filled the bridge. This is Commander Ward of the Dominion Fleet. Your presence is noted. Leave this sector immediately. These relics are now property of the Dominion Empire. Captain Turner stood from her chair. This is a scientific expedition in neutral space. We have right of discovery. You have 10 minutes to leave. Commander Ward cut her off. The Dominion claims all ancient technology. Your laws mean nothing to us. The transmission ended. On the tactical display, 30 Dominion warships moved into attack formation. Each one was larger than the Star Seeker, armed with weapons that could tear through their shields in seconds. Captain, James stepped forward. We need to contact Atlas, the human fleet. A blast of red energy shot past their ship, missing by meters. The Dominion wasn't waiting 10 minutes. All power to shields. Captain Turner ordered. Send a distress signal to the Science Council. More Dominion ships appeared. Their black hulls blocked out the stars as they surrounded the ancient fleet. On a nearby command ship, Commander Ward watched with amusement. Look at those outdated vessels, he said to his bridge crew. The humans built them so long ago, they still use physical metal for armor. One shot will crack them open. The Dominion ships opened fire. Bright red beams struck the nearest human vessel and vanished into nothing. No explosion, no damage. The ancient ships simply absorbed the attack like it was nothing. Atlas's voice came through all communication channels. Warning. Hostile actions detected. Guardian Reserve defensive protocols activated. This is your only chance to withdraw. Commander Ward laughed. Listen to that primitive ag. It thinks it can stand against modern warships. He turned to his weapons officer. Full barrage. Destroy that fleet. The Dominion ships fired everything they had. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and quantum missiles streaked across space. The human fleet didn't move. They seemed to just wait as thousands of weapons flew toward them. James gripped his console as he watched. Captain, we should move back. I don't think. A flash of light filled the view screens, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When they could see again, jaws dropped all across the Star Seeker's bridge. The human fleet was untouched, not a single scratch. But now they were moving, their engines glowing with strange blue fire. Atlas spoke again, and this time there was a hint of sadness in its voice. Peaceful withdrawal rejected. Beginning defense measures. All neutral vessels, please maintain safe distance. Commander Ward's laughter died in his throat as his tactical officer screamed. Sir, those ships, they're giving off energy readings that aren't possible. Our sensors can't even measure. The first human ship fired. A simple beam of white light touched a Dominion warship. The massive vessel didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It simply disappeared, as if it had never existed. What just happened? Captain Turner whispered. James checked his readings. If I'm understanding this correctly, that weapon didn't destroy the ship. It removed it from our timeline completely. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet. Their most powerful weapons couldn't even scratch the ancient ships, but each shot from the human vessels made their ships vanish without a trace. Recall our weapons, Commander Ward shouted. Retreat, full power to engines. But it was too late. Atlas's voice echoed one final time. The Dominion Empire has been judged a threat to peaceful species. The Guardian Reserve will now execute its primary protocol, protection of developing civilizations. The human fleet moved with impossible speed, their primitive engines carrying them faster than any modern ship. One by one, Dominion vessels vanished, erased from existence by weapons that worked on principles no one could understand. Commander Ward's command ship was the last. As the white beam reached for his vessel, his final words broadcast across all channels. Impossible. They were supposed to be primitives. How could humans build something so? Then his ship vanished, leaving only empty space where the mighty Dominion fleet had been. On the Starseeker's bridge, Captain Turner turned to James. "I think," she said quietly, "we need to reassess everything we thought we knew about human technology." James nodded, staring at the ancient fleet that no longer looked primitive at all. "Captain, I have a feeling this is only the beginning." News of the Dominion fleet's defeat spread quickly through the galaxy. The Star Seeker remained with the ancient fleet, now joined by 5 Science Council research vessels. James spent every waking moment working with Atlas, trying to understand the incredible technology humans had created. "I still don't understand," James said, examining a seemingly simple engine part. "Why build ships that look so basic on the outside?" Atlas's holographic form appeared beside him. "Humans had a concept called hiding in plain sight. The best place to hide something valuable is where others think nothing valuable exists. They were in the engine room of the fleet's flagship. What at first appeared to be primitive particle drives were actually housing something far more advanced. As James watched, panels shifted and revealed complex machinery that seemed to bend the laws of physics. These aren't engines in the way you understand them," Atlas explained. "They don't push the ship through space. They move space around the ship." Engineer Roberts, who had become much more respectful since the battle, scanned the machinery with wide eyes. "But that's impossible. The energy required to bend space would be more than a star produces in a year." "Correct," Atlas said. "If you used conventional power sources, humans found something better." The AI gestured to a small black cube at the center of the engine room, no bigger than James's hand. "This contains a pocket universe, the energy of an entire cosmos, controlled and harnessed." James stepped closer to the cube, his scanner showing readings that made no sense. "Is this what powered those weapons? The ones that made the Dominion ships disappear?" "The timeline erasure cannons. Yes, though those were a last resort. The fleet has many other defensive systems that are less permanent." As if to demonstrate, Atlas activated a nearby console. The wall seemed to melt away, revealing a massive room that hadn't been there before. Inside were rows of devices that looked like simple metal spheres. "Quantum phase shifters," Atlas said. "They can move the ship between dimensions. What appears to be solid metal armor is actually thousands of layers of reality stacked together. Energy weapons pass through harmlessly because the ship simply isn't in the same dimension when they hit." Roberts shook his head in amazement, and the Dominion thought they could destroy these ships with plasma cannons. "That was the intention," Atlas replied. "Humans knew that arrogant species would always exist, species that would attack anything they thought was weaker, so they built this fleet to be the perfect trap." James walked around the engine room, noting how every primitive component hid something incredible behind it. But why leave? Why didn't humans stay and use this technology themselves? Atlas was quiet for a moment. "That information is restricted. However, I can tell you that humans didn't leave. They evolved, changed into something beyond physical form. But before they did, they left behind guardians for the younger races they knew would follow." Suddenly, alarms blared through the ship. Captain Turner's voice came through the communicator. "James, we're detecting multiple Dominion fleets entering the sector. Much bigger than before. They're coming from all directions." Atlas's form straightened. It seems the Dominion didn't learn their lesson, initiating full combat protocols. "Please return to your ship." "Wait," James called as the AI began to fade. "What are you going to do?" "Show them what this fleet can really do. What they've seen so far was just a fraction of our capability. The simple weapons, designed to look primitive." Atlas's voice held a note of what almost sounded like excitement. "Now they get to see the advanced ones." As James and Roberts hurried back to their shuttle, the entire fleet hummed with power. The primitive ships began to change. Armor plates shifted, revealing layers of technology that seemed to glow with impossible energy. Weapons emerged that didn't look like weapons at all, strange geometric shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. "You know what's funny?" Roberts said as they ran. "If they hadn't attacked us, if they'd just been peaceful, they never would have known what these ships could do. James looked back at the fleet one last time before boarding their shuttle. I think that was exactly what humans were counting on. The best defense isn't just the one your enemy doesn't know about. It's the one they're too arrogant to believe exists. The Star Seeker and other research vessels pulled back to a safe distance. Through their view screens, they watched as 5 massive Dominion fleets emerged from hyperspace. Hundreds of warships filled the void, their black hulls blocking out entire star systems from view. "This is Grand Admiral Pierce of the Dominion Empire." A cold voice broadcast across all channels. "The loss of our first fleet was unexpected, but now you face the full might of the Dominion. Surrender the human vessels or be destroyed with them." Atlas responded by activating the ancient fleet's full combat systems. The ships that had looked so primitive now transformed completely. Their hulls rippled like liquid metal, geometric patterns of light racing across their surfaces. Strange devices unfolded into shapes that seemed to bend reality itself. "They still don't understand," James said, watching from the Star Seeker's bridge. "Even after what happened to their first fleet, they still think they can win with brute force." Captain Turner nodded grimly. Pride comes before a fall. The Dominion ships opened fire. Millions of energy beams, missiles, and plasma torpedoes filled space with deadly light. It looked like enough firepower to destroy a planet. But the human fleet didn't try to dodge. Instead, Atlas's voice echoed through space. "Combat demonstration authorized. Activating quantum mirror array." The space around the human ships suddenly crystallized. The massive barrage of Dominion weapons hit this crystalline barrier and bounced back. Every single shot turned around and streaked back toward the ships that fired them. "Impossible!" Grand Admiral Pierce shouted as his own weapons tore through his fleet. All ships, evasive action. But Atlas wasn't finished. The human ships began to move, but not in any way modern ships could. They didn't fly through space. They seemed to slide between moments of time itself. 1 second they were in one place. The next they simply existed somewhere else, without moving through the space between. "Phase shift complete," Atlas announced. "Beginning counterattack. Activating solar forge cannons." The front of each human ship opened like a blooming flower. Inside, artificial suns burned bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at them. These miniature stars pulsed once, and beams of pure stellar fire erupted toward the Dominion fleet. Where these beams touched, ships didn't just explode. They melted into their basic atomic components. Entire squadrons of warships dissolved into clouds of glowing particles. "Fall back," Pierce ordered, but his fleet was in chaos. Some ships tried to flee into hyperspace, but the human vessels were somehow blocking their escape. "Your ships use hyperspace travel," Atlas explained calmly. "We use something much older, much more fundamental. Humans called it the deep drive, the ability to move through the basement level of reality itself." James watched in awe as the human ships demonstrated technology that shouldn't be possible. They split into multiple copies across different dimensions. They turned enemy weapons into harmless light. Some simply reached out and shut down Dominion ships by turning off the laws of physics around them. "Why?" Grand Admiral Pierce's voice shook. "Why didn't you use these weapons first? Why wait?" "The timeline erasers were mercy," Atlas replied. "Quick, clean. These weapons are meant to serve as a lesson, to show what happens when you threaten peace." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, the mighty Dominion armada was reduced to scattered atoms and floating debris. Not a single scratch marked the ancient human vessels. As the human ships powered down their weapons, returning to their simple, primitive-looking state, James understood something profound. "It wasn't just about hiding their power," he said quietly. "The humans built these ships as a teaching tool. The simple exterior was a test, to see how advanced species would treat something they thought was weaker than them." Captain Turner watched as the fleet resumed its original formation, and the Dominion failed that test. "Yes," James nodded. "They judged by appearances, showed aggression instead of respect, and in doing so, They proved exactly why humans left these guardians behind. Atlas's voice came through one final time. The lesson has been delivered, but this was just one fleet, protecting one sector. Across the galaxy, more human vessels wait in hiding, watching, protecting. Remember this day and remember why we fight not with our strongest weapons first, but with our simplest. 1 week after the battle, the Starseekers research lab was filled with scientists from across the galaxy. They all came to study the fleet that had so easily defeated the mighty Dominion. James stood at the front of the room, preparing to share what Atlas had revealed to him. "Before I begin," he said, looking at the eager faces before him, "Atlas has granted me permission to share information that has been hidden for thousands of years." The room fell silent. Even Captain Turner, sitting in the front row, leaned forward with interest. "Yesterday," James continued, "Atlas took me deep into the flagship's data core. What I found there," he paused, collecting his thoughts. "What I found was humanity's final message to the galaxy." He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above them. It showed a human, dressed in simple clothes, looking directly at them across thousands of years. "To those who find our guardians," the human began, "I am Professor Thomas Miller, Chief Architect of the Guardian Reserve Project. If you're seeing this, it means our fleet has revealed its true nature in defense of peaceful species." The scientists whispered among themselves as the message continued. "We humans knew something that troubled us deeply," Professor Miller's hologram said. "We knew that as species advance, they often become arrogant. They start to believe that newer always means better. That might makes right. We saw it in our own history, and we saw it in the stars." James watched as his fellow scientists nodded, many of them thinking about the Dominion's arrogance. "So we created a test," the hologram continued. "We built fleets of ships that looked primitive on the outside. We scattered them across the galaxy. Each fleet was designed to attract attention, to look like easy targets. And then we waited. Waited for what? Someone in the audience asked. The hologram seemed to smile. We waited to see who would try to steal them, who would dismiss them as worthless relics, and who would approach with respect, with curiosity, with peaceful intentions. Professor Miller's image grew serious. The ships themselves are not the true guardians. The true guardian is the test itself. How a species treats what they believe to be primitive tells us everything about whether they deserve access to advanced technology. The room was completely silent now, everyone understanding the deeper meaning of the fleet's design. "But this is not the only test we left behind," the hologram revealed. Across the galaxy, humanity scattered thousands of similar challenges. Some look like primitive technology. Others appear as simple puzzles or basic mathematical equations or seemingly worthless artifacts. James felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. How many human artifacts had been dismissed as primitive throughout history? How many tests had been failed without anyone even knowing they were being tested? "To those who show wisdom," Professor Miller continued, "who approach the unknown with respect rather than arrogance, more knowledge will be revealed. The ships you've seen are just the beginning. We left behind greater wonders, greater knowledge, but only for those who prove themselves worthy." The hologram raised its hand, and strange symbols appeared in the air around it. "These markers will lead you to other tests, other guardians. But remember, the true test is not in solving the puzzle or claiming the technology. The true test is in how you approach it." As the message ended, the room erupted in excited discussion. Scientists pulled out data pads, trying to copy down the symbols before they faded. "James," Captain Turner called out over the noise, "those symbols. I've seen something like them before, on what we thought was just a piece of space debris near the Orion sector." James nodded slowly. "And I bet if we go back there now, looking at it with respect instead of dismissal, we might find something very different than space debris." "How many tests are out there?" Roberts wondered aloud. "How many times have we failed them without even knowing?" "That's not the important question," James replied. "The important question is, now that we know they exist, how will we approach the unknown from this day forward?" The room fell quiet again as everyone considered his words. Somewhere out there, Humanity's other guardians were waiting, watching, testing. And now, every piece of primitive technology they encountered might be more than it appeared. The greatest test, they realized, had only just begun. 3 months after the discovery of the human fleet, the galaxy had changed. The Dominion Empire had collapsed, its remaining forces retreating to their home systems. But more importantly, the way species treated ancient discoveries had completely transformed. James stood on the observation deck of the Star Seeker, watching as research teams carefully approached what appeared to be a simple stone monolith floating in space. No one rushed to claim it. No one dismissed it as primitive. Instead, they treated it with careful respect. "Another test," Captain Turner asked, joining him at the window. "Maybe," James replied. "Or maybe just a stone. That's the brilliant part of what humans did. Now we have to treat everything as potentially significant." Atlas's hologram appeared beside them. Over the past months, the AI had become more open, sharing more about humanity's plans. "The monolith is indeed one of ours," it confirmed, "though its purpose is quite different from the fleet." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the stone structure began to glow with a soft blue light. Symbols appeared on its surface, the same ones they had seen in Professor Miller's message. "The humans left behind more than weapons," Atlas explained. "This is a medical database. It contains cures for thousands of diseases, some of which haven't even evolved yet." Captain Turner shook her head in amazement. "And it just looks like a rock. How many other rocks have we passed by over the centuries?" "That's the question every species is asking now," James said. "The Science Council has received reports of previously ignored artifacts being re-examined across the galaxy. Some have already revealed themselves to be human technology." Through the window, they watched as the research team carefully documented the monolith. Their scanners showed readings that made no sense. The simple stone somehow contained more data than all the computers in the known galaxy combined. "But not all of them activate," Atlas added. "The tests continue. Only those who show true respect and peaceful intentions are granted access to what lies within." James turned to the AI. "Atlas, there's something I've been wanting to ask. The fleet, the monolith, all these tests. They're not just about protecting younger species, are they? They're about teaching us." "Correct." Atlas seemed pleased. "Humans understood that advanced technology without wisdom would lead to destruction. Each test is designed not just to evaluate, but to instill important principles." The ship's communication system suddenly activated. "Captain, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. More human artifacts are revealing themselves. A healing center in the Pleiades. A climate control system in the Carina sector. They all look like simple stone or metal structures before, but now—" Captain Turner smiled. "Now that we've learned to look with respect instead of judgment, we can see them for what they really are." "There is one more thing you should know," Atlas said. "The fleet's purpose wasn't just to defend or test. It was to prepare." "Prepare for what?" James asked. "Humanity didn't just evolve or disappear. They transcended physical form, moving to another level of existence. But they knew that someday, other species would be ready to follow. All these tests, all these hidden technologies, they're not just tools. They're steps on a path." The implications hit James like a wave. "You mean, all of this is preparing us to evolve like they did?" "When you're ready," Atlas confirmed. "When all species learn to approach the unknown with wisdom and peace instead of arrogance and violence. When you understand that the simplest things might hold the greatest wonders." Outside, the monolith continued to glow, its ancient knowledge waiting to be shared. Across the galaxy, other artifacts were awakening, revealing themselves to those who had learned to look with new eyes. "So," Captain Turner said quietly, "the real question isn't what we'll find out there. The real question is, are we becoming wise enough to find it?" James watched as another research ship carefully approached the monolith. No weapons, no attempts to claim it, just careful, respectful study. "I think," he said, "we're finally learning the lesson humans wanted to teach us. The greatest power isn't in having the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It's in having the wisdom to use them right." Atlas nodded, its holographic form glowing brighter. And that, after all these thousands of years, was exactly what humanity hoped you would understand.